like I said, there has been some pushback about the celebrations, that they celebrate everything, and, there's this, I think, if you compare this to there was a controversy, and I'm putting quotes in this because this was one of those manufactured controversies around the women's basketball championship game. You had this kind of once in a generation talent. Caitlin Clark had this epic performance in the semifinals, goes and plays LSU in the finals, and they win. And there's a player on LSU's team is the highest paid college player for what she's been able to generate. And part of it is she's such a kind of tough girl. So her celebrations are less celebrations, and they're more like, pounding of the chest and pointing at me. And she trash talked Caitlin Clark, and then it was this whole thing. The celebrations at Oklahoma among softball, that's the kind of celebrations you're used to. It's kind of trash talking and hubris and look at me and all of that sort of stuff. And they're actually celebrating, and it irritated the other players. And, being better than the other team is typically irritating to the other team too. So that's the controversy that was there. But there is a difference, isn't there, between those two celebrations and what it points to. And I'm going to make a huge leap. Are you ready? We're going to take a big jump.
I'm coming with you.
Are you with me?
Let's do this.
I was thinking about that this week when I saw this whole press conference from these 3 Oklahoma University players talking about joy and how they're looking for joy and how fundamentally different joy is from pride. And one of the reasons this is front and center in my mind is I lead a Sunday school class every week with teenagers, and I start with what we call a segment called Problems of the World. And usually it comes along with kind of the voice of God. It's time for Problems of the World. And essentially the goal is just to show how anything you come across in your life is connected with faith. Almost anything. We've hit a couple things where I've had trouble bringing it back around. But, anything that they saw in culture, when that Satanic Grammys performance happened, they brought that up. It could be personal. I've got a history teacher, and this is what he says. I was really surprised because the question was, why are there pride flags hanging in front of our church? And I said, I didn't even notice that because it's Pride Month, and so the city of Colorado Springs, with the city downtown partnership, has hung pride flags everywhere. And they're interspersed in different parts of town with other flags because people can appeal to have their own flags hung. Yeah. And these weren't. These right in front of our church. And you kind of think, I didn't implicate the motives of the city, but you got to think 10 years ago, the person tasked with it would have gone, yeah, maybe I won't do it here because this is a church. Right. 10 years later, and I'm giving this person and the downtown partnership and all that the benefit of the doubt, it doesn't even occur to them that in front of a church should not be the place to hang these flags. Now, it's not right in front of the church. It's across the street, and they're not big flags. They're little banner, things that they hang on street poles. But it's irritating. And so that was front and center in my mind all week, like what should be done? Should something be done? How do we think about these things? But everyone's talking about how noisy pride is. We've talked about it. Dustin Messer on Twitter put out something that says, it used to be that pride was about, we deserve a place at the table too. And now it's basically become, you don't deserve a place at the table. You shouldn't belong here if you don't believe in us. There's just this outward push, this outward turn that you see reflected, this outward and upward turn, let's put it that way, that you see reflected in the Oklahoma women's team, and how fundamentally different that is than everyone saying, look inside, look inside, look inside, be proud of who you are, be proud of who you are. And by the way, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. I just feel like that's something that is such a stark contrast, and maybe something to talk about with your kids. I'm going to have an interview later on today, and the title of the interview is How to Survive Pride Month. And because it is something you can't sit it out. You can't pretend it's not happening as a parent, as a mom or a dad, as a grandparent, as a leader. You got to point to it, and you got to show it, and you got to expose it for what it is. And the difference between the inward turn and the outward turn and the upward turn is really, really important, biblically speaking, as to understand our culture from a Christian framework, and so on. So I guess that's what struck me maybe about the Oklahoma University team, is how fundamentally different the whole thing is than what we're being told by every other voice all month long really loudly.
I like that leap. I don't think it was that much of a leap at all. And I think one of the coolest things about it too is that if you look at the fruit, like you look at the type of people and how they present themselves to the world on kind of both these sides of the aisle, that one side is much better adjusted than the other side. When you have somebody who's talking about finding their identity in the Lord and that they feel free to win or lose softball games because that's not the most important thing. Like you get a certain sense of that person. And then you have someone on the other side saying like, my city didn't hang enough pride flags and now I don't feel welcome here, or et cetera. It's like you are, if you're looking for your validation or affirmation constantly from outside of you, and you believe that you can't be whole or healthy without that, you're going to be constantly looking for it, and that is no way to live. That's going to be really, really hard. I think you see that in people.
You do, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And it's a hard thing to say out loud because it'll immediately spark outrage. But the mental well-being of that community, and again, I want to be really clear, this should elicit sadness, compassion. It should break our hearts. It should push us and encourage us to lean outward towards this community, not away from them.
Yeah.
But the mental health and well-being of this community is not good.
It's not good.
The suicidality is incredibly high. And this is what happens when you have committed your life to making reality change and bend according to what you think is true and real, when reality actually is a particular way and it's not that way.